My name is Scott Key. I'm with VMware, and I've only been with VMware for about 2 months. I spent the previous 17 years in the financial services industry, mostly with Citibank, Citigroup. I'm sure most of you have heard of them. And I recently joined VMware in a new role to start a financial services industry vertical for VMware, to start focusing more on that industry and specific use cases and solutions for the industry. So what I want to talk to you guys about today is mostly from my experience over the past, I'd say, 12 months. Again, 2 of that being at VMware and talking with a lot of other financial services customers, but a lot of it was experiences I had at Citi and best practices that we found trying to get from all of our VMware clusters that we had into a private cloud scenario, which when I say private cloud, I really mean more of a self-service portal for all users and automation wrapped around that and on top of it. So that's the goal of the session today. I know the title can be a little bit deceiving on how it's set up. Here's our standard disclaimer. Have to have that in there. So for the agenda, I'll start by just going quickly over the typical VMware cluster scenario and show you some of the tools. Most of you guys are already using those today. Explain a little bit of why would you want to go to a private cloud versus what you've already got today. And then are you ready for the cloud? And that's really the big piece here, is some of the best practices and things that you might want to do with your clusters before you introduce that self-service and automation. And then I'll show you a few of the solutions at a high level that VMware has. And although we're getting towards the end of the conference now, I think the solutions floor is still open. So some of those things you'll be able to, if you haven't already, go over and get some demos of and look at. So as most of you are already using, well, by show of hands, who's already has VMware clusters in your environment today? I assume most everybody does. Yeah. And this slide shows your basic server consolidation that you, I'm sure, have been doing over the last 2 or 3 years. And these items coming up here on the side, how many people are using DRS as an example? Okay, that's good. In the past, those hands were much less. So a lot of the products that you see listed on the side there, these are very important products, whether a part of Enterprise Plus. These are tools that are very important to have in your clusters before you start doing self-service automation or private cloud, if you will. And I'll go into some more details about that here in just a minute. So why do you want to go to the private cloud? Let's dive into that for a second. So how many of you or your management and your companies are being asked to get your price points down to that Amazon, Google type model? And is that a common? Yeah. So today, in most server consolidation cases, this graph shows that most people are in that 35 to 40% utilization range on their host servers. Some of you may be higher, some of you may be lower, but that's kind of what the average is, which is great because before you had standalone x86 servers that were at 10%, right? So it's been a big win. There's been a big cost save there. And on average, with a 2 gigabit memory instance for a VM, you're looking at about 15 cents an hour somewhere is usually where that falls into from a cost standpoint. Now, if you're able to increase the utilization, which typically means adding more VMs into your environment, that tends to drive that cost down to around 10 cents and getting your utilization up to about 60%. And as I mentioned, in the case of Citi, this is what we worked on to try to get our cost a little bit lower, get more VMs in there, using different tools, different technologies that were available to us. So the big key piece, though, in getting down to that magical 4 or 5 cents an hour type number, which is what the Googles and the Amazons are at today, is to add automation, because that's where you start to get some of that OpEx savings and time to market. And by adding that automation in, that's going to get you down to that price point that you're really wanting, but in a private cloud versus going to the public cloud and some of the issues that are out there with that. So the big thing from the old world of delivering your VMs or physical servers to your customers had very long timelines. Server consolidation with VMware over what you've probably been doing over the last couple of years has definitely helped shorten that typical 60, 45-day timeline of getting a physical server, getting it in your data centers, et cetera. And you're able to provision a VM very quickly. If you introducing self-service and automation is going to allow that timeline to shrink, I don't know what it is today, maybe a week with end-to-end processes, but you should be able to get that done very, very quickly and be much more agile. And that's the big thing for going to a private cloud. I've been asked by several customers, why would I go to a private cloud? I've got the ability to create resource pools and do all these things in my current clusters. And the big thing is becoming more agile and trying to get that cost down and introducing the automation to your users. So again, the self-service functions, service catalogs. If you guys were how many of you were at the keynote, the opening keynote on Tuesday? Okay, so you're aware at least now of the Vcloud Director tool that VMware has announced, and hopefully you've got to see it on the solutions floor. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But basically, how many of you are using resource pools today? And I'm doing a lot of show of hands here, but okay. So resource pools are very important, especially as you look to move to an automation, self-service type function. The service catalogs, creating your images that are available with certain apps in those images, et cetera. You can do that through our Vcloud Director tool, which I'll show you in a little bit about that in a few minutes. And another reason that you want to try to go to a private cloud or even public cloud versus just having your own standard clusters is financial energy, which a lot of that you've already seen these savings through your server consolidation. The human energy part is where you're going to get a lot more of that OpEx savings that I mentioned earlier. You're going to be able to get more automation in place, which is going to drive down the timelines and the number of resources you have that have to touch those items. And I don't know does anyone in here, are you tracking your, what we call here Earth's energy, but your cooling and power savings from virtualization? Okay, yeah, not a lot of people do that. It's not a real easy thing to track, but it's a pretty neat tool, especially with executives, to show them the savings that you're getting in that respect. So at the end of the day, going to a private cloud, it's a brand new business model for enterprise IT, what we like to call IT as a service, and it energizes your business through IT, simplifying IT, lowering cost, and increasing your agility. All right, so let's get to the meat of this. So I like this picture to kind of show the point of what I'm about to go through. So as you can see, I happen to have a travel trailer, so this one resonates well with me. But as you can see in that top picture, somebody has a very old travel trailer there, and they've tried to make out of an old Blazer something to pull that travel trailer. And I'm guessing they're not going to make it very far trying to pull it with that. Where at the bottom you have the right engine to pull the right device. And the point here is if you don't have your VMware cluster set up properly and you try to put that self-service automation on top of it or that big travel trailer on the back of it and start going down the road, you're not going to make it very far if you don't have the right things to manage that environment. So let's start talking about that a little bit. Culture and politics. The biggest one here, which is the top one, is multi-tenant clusters. So how many of you today have clusters that have multiple businesses on them within your environment? Okay, and I assume the ones that didn't raise your hand probably have siloed clusters per business today. Depending on how big your companies are, you may be able to survive creating internal private clouds with those siloed clusters, but to really get the efficiencies, you want to have those, say, production-wise. Most people split out production and non-production, but you want to have your clusters combined so that you have a larger number of clusters, bigger clusters, and more VMs, more tenants on those to be able to fill in a lot of that white space and get the efficiencies. So that's a big piece is figuring out what can I do with my businesses to get them to share resources. One of the things when I was at Citi that we used to deal with this, a lot of people said, well, I have to have my own servers for memory, for CPU. I don't want to share that with somebody else. But the storage on the back end was shared. So as we started talking through all those issues with them, it's like, well, why are you concerned about this piece? We have the tools in place to be able to guarantee you what you need, but you're sharing your storage, which is where your data's at, and that's really, the most important piece. So, kind of going through some discussions like that seemed to always help to get them to understand that it's not as bad as it seems at first. These other things, I'll roll through these quickly because I have slides to go into these a little bit deeper, but the SLA and process compromise. So, today you probably can provision a VM in less than 24 hours. I mean, technically it takes maybe 5 minutes if you have, templates and things set up to go out and create a VM. But typically the request process on the front end of that, and whether, if you require change control, those types of things, approvals for chargebacks, whatever the case might be, and then any processes on the back end of that with applications and things like that. If a user or a developer asks for a VM, even though it maybe takes 5 minutes to provision it, it may be a week or so before they get it, right? And if you're going to introduce a self-service function, you definitely want to have those processes as streamlined as you can. Because if they can go in and say, okay, yeah, I want this, and click on a few buttons, if they don't get that VM available to them in a matter of, I would say that day, then I don't know that you've gained a whole lot from the previous process that you had. So time to market for those users is very important, especially today in the development environment. So cleaning up those processes and getting those as simple as you can is very important. Do more with less, simplify. This is in regards to your standards, right? So today in your environment, some of you may have done a good job at getting a few standards, but most of us out there have lots of standards, almost to the point where you have no standards because you have so many different images that you're trying to support. And when you introduce self-service and automation, the fewer standards that you can have out there, the better. That's one of the reasons that a Google and an Amazon have been so successful. They don't have a lot of options when you go out to get instances from them. The nice thing about a private cloud internally is you don't want to give a lot of options because that's difficult to manage on the back end and it doesn't help you much with the OpEx side. But you can make those standards particular to your business and how your apps are configured, et cetera, and you can't do that on the public side. So that's one of the advantages to a private cloud. Another big thing is from a cost standpoint. How many of you have cost models or rate cards, chargebacks within your company today? And I imagine many of you, your hardware is purchased, you build the VMs, you give out the VMs, and there's probably really no charging, if you will, internally. That seems to be a very common case. It's very important that, first of all, your virtual instances, if you do track costs, need to be cheaper than physical instances. There's a lot of companies out there that do have rate cards and such, and when they put together a cost for a VM, it seems to be as much, and I've even seen some that were more expensive than a physical server. So if that's the case, it's a very hard sell to grow your virtualization program, if you will, if the customer can go get a physical server for the same amount because they're going to feel safer with that. So you got to make sure that your VMs are cheaper. And another thing that we did at Citi that made it very successful moving forward with our cloud offering, excuse me, and our virtualization program was we started treating our IT department, or at least the team that I manage, like a vendor. So we started doing marketing and sales really inside of our company, watching our other vendors, watching the Amazons and the Googles as an example, and the way that they manage stuff. Instead of just being that internal IT group that is going to give these functions to the business. We treat ourselves like a vendor, go out, sell, market, and do those types of things. And it really seemed to help when we started to take more of that attitude, like we were our own business rather than just the IT group that supported a big bank. Another thing we did that helped a lot was we worked from the top down, but we also worked from the bottom up with growing our virtualization program and doing this marketing and sales function. So, we would show our top executives the savings and things that they would see from virtualization, but then we would also go and at the same time and show the systems administrators, the app owners, what they will get from virtualization. They have a lot of stereotypical concerns about latency and performance and things like that. So we would show them a lot of reports, give them proof of concept environments where they could test things, and kind of work it from both ends. And it seemed to come down from the top that they wanted to save the money. The SAs and the app owners would feel comfortable that the systems were going to work, and they'd kind of meet in the middle, and it seemed to really spawn adoption and grow things a lot faster. And another thing is, we saw this a lot in Citi, and I've seen it a lot with other customers. As you start to move into the self-service function, some of the IT staff starts to fear automation. Am I going to lose my job because I'm building this environment that does what myself and my peers and other people do today? What am I going to do when this is done? And one thing that we've seen with virtualization is now network, storage, server all comes together into one. So typically you've had people who were specializing in each of those spaces, and when you get admins to learn more about all three of those environments, it opens up a lot of opportunities for them and makes it makes it a lot easier for them to manage these types of environments. So if you have people who are fearing moving forward with this and pushing back on it, I don't know of anybody out that I know of, and I'm sure all of you, that have a lot of people just sitting around twiddling their thumbs today with nothing to do. It's usually quite the opposite. We're short on resources, so there's a lot of opportunity there. And putting together some programs or some ideas as you enter the self-service automation function, the people that might get moved into a different role, make sure you communicate that well as to what those options are, and hopefully they'll have options for them. So insight and management, and this is a very very important one. And how many of you track your like metrics and data and things on your current virtualization systems today? At Citi, we did like weekly metrics that showed exactly where we were in terms of percent virtual utilization, showing physical servers going down while virtual instances were coming up. We tracked that week over week, and we did quarterly updates and had nice trending for a couple of years. And that was very important to be able to show our management where we were headed. And as you move into a self-service automation type function, it's going to be even more important to be able to see that data and understand where you're at from a metric standpoint. The monitoring and performance tools, this was probably one of, if not the biggest things for us that helped us move forward with our programs. So vCenter, Virtual Center, is a great management system, but as most of you probably know, it's not great at letting you troubleshoot and understand exactly what's happening in your environment. There's real-time data there, but there's a lot of clicks you have to go through and things to really understand what's happening. So getting the tools in place to go on top of Virtual Center to really understand your server, your storage, your network, having views of how your cluster's performing, how your hosts are performing, and how your VMs are performing, and having real-time data to be able to do that is extremely important, especially as you move into a self-service automation type function, because as people are out there, getting VMs, even if you put some limitations around how many VMs a group or a developer or a person can go out and get, understanding that capacity is going to be vital. And I was excited when I heard on Tuesday that VMware has purchased Integrin, and if you haven't seen that product, I know the solutions floor is open for a while today. If you guys are still around, I would definitely go take a look at that product because it does exactly this. And there's a handful of other products out there that do it as well, but it gives you a really nice management view of your entire cluster. It starts actually at the data center level and then shows you your clusters and then your host servers and then all your VMs, and it has nice pretty red, green, yellow lights to show you where those clusters are at. But that is extremely important as you move forward. And a quick note about the network side. I don't know if any of you or how many of you are using the Enterprise Plus tools, but the Cisco Nexus 1000V is an example in combination with the virtual distributed switch from VMware is extremely important to give your networking team insight to what's happening in that network. We had a couple of outages on the city side that were misconfigured networks on the back end, but it took us a while to figure out what that was. And excuse me, we recently put in added Enterprise Plus to our program and got the Nexus 1000Vs, and now our network teams are able to see inside of those virtual switches, and they look like real Cisco switches to them, which they're very comfortable and they understand very well. So those types of things, if you don't have those in place yet, as you are getting to the point where you're going to move to a private cloud or self-service, it's very important to try to get those types of functions. From a configuration standpoint, again, it's important to have consistency. So having like a configuration management tool to make sure that all of your host servers look the same, especially if you're going to pull them all into a larger cloud. You want to make sure that they're consistent at all times, and you need a tool to be able to manage that. And then on the managed VM side, and the tools like the Integrian and such can help you with this, but understanding from your VM side, if someone abandons a VM, if they were using, especially with self-service, if they have a VM, they were using it for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden, it just drops off and it doesn't show any activity, you need some type of reports that tell you that. And I'll talk about this in a minute, having leases on your VMs and things like that, so that if they don't answer back saying, yeah, I still need this VM when the lease comes up, then you can go ahead and get rid of that and not have abandoned VMs out there. If you have VMs that you've given a certain amount of resources to, and by watching the VM and how it performs, you need to add more resources to it. Having a tool that you can really track that rather than having the user call and say, hey, I need another CPU or I need another gig of RAM for my VM. You can really see, do they really need that, or you can proactively add that to their VMs before they ask for it. So those types of tools are extremely important as well. I mentioned this earlier, but the Enterprise and Enterprise Plus features, it's very important to have these types of tools in place. DRS is a big one. The virtual distributed networking switch, as I mentioned, with Nexus 1000V on top of that. The storage and network I/O throttling, that's a big piece now available in 4.1, the vSphere 4.1. The virtual distributed networking switch that comes with Enterprise Plus has the function in it now to do the network I/O throttling. And on the storage side, we have in vStorage, our storage vMotion, we have the ability to do that on the SAN side. The NAS function is coming soon, but those types of throttling are important. Those will really help you with your VMs to make sure that you don't have a single VM that takes over a lot of resources, either SAN or storage or network on one of your clusters or on one of your host servers. You can basically set a limit of how high it can go in terms of bandwidth usage. So I mentioned earlier about the streamlining your processes. So one of the things that we found is 90% of the time it takes to get a VM is all process, right? 10% of it is actually creating the VM. So going through and understanding and cleaning up your request processes, approvals, do you require change records? Do you have the ability to hook into a change record system and create those automatically if you add self-service? Those are all things that you need to go through inside of your environment to make sure that that you clean that up as best you can. Some of these things are difficult because those processes have been there for a long time. Starting this in a development environment usually helps to try to clean up that process because it's not as stringent as usually a production process, and it'll help you get at least a step further down the road. Automating VM provisioning will not change the processes, so you got to clean those up as best as you can. And as I said earlier, being agile is extremely important. Today, if you have these rigid processes that are all wrapped around how people request things, there's compromise that has to happen there, and that has to be cleaned up. So from a process flow standpoint, one of the things that we did at City, and I've seen other groups do this as well, is go in and chart out, using like a Visio or something like that, your entire process of how you go through the request all the way to delivery of a VM today. Chart all that out, figure out where your bottlenecks are, where all the timelines are at, and then start to clean that up. And it makes a nice image that you can share with others to show them, some people, when they see that, they didn't realize that it was so cumbersome to go through that whole process until they see it on paper. And then it allows you to kind of clean that up and work through that with all the groups that are involved. So from a standards side, simplifying those standards, as I mentioned before, is very important. Try to find, one Windows 2008 image as an example, one Red Hat image for your base OS if you don't already have those today. And if you're going to add on some apps like, say, a WebSphere or a TC server or something like that, and work that into it, try to get those as minimal as possible. Don't have, 100 different options that are out there that someone has to manage on the back end. Like I said earlier, the builds can be specific to your business needs, but just try not to have too many of them. Set leases on your VMs. I mentioned that earlier. Don't let them spawn VMs and just provision but never deprovision. So setting leases so that you can have a tool or use the programs to send out a note to say you have a 30-day lease. Your lease is up in 5 days, do you still need this VM, yes or no? If they say yes, then it extends that lease. If they say no, then you can set it up so it will send additional questions to them until at a certain point you're going to basically nuke that VM. And again, that's something that's really good to start and to try in your development environment and then move it on to production later. So from a cost standpoint, I mentioned cost models and things earlier. If you don't have a chargeback model today or you don't understand your cost, I think it's very important as you move to a self-service function, private cloud, to at least understand what those costs are, get those mapped out. Even if you don't charge people back on a regular basis, it's very important that they understand what their usage is and what the costs are, because at some point, especially if you decide to move down over to a public cloud in the future, you're going to have a rate card model with a public cloud. So we have the Chargeback program that VMware has, and one of the nice things about that, and I have it listed here, we call it showback instead of chargeback. So if you're not actually charging someone, at least a tool like that will help you capture those metrics and show people what their usage is and what that cost would be if you were charging them. And it's kind of a step in the direction of being able to charge them in the future. And if you do have a cost model for your VMs today, moving to the cloud is going to make that a little tougher, because typically in server consolidation, you're taking servers that are consistent, will be there for months or years. So every month that same server's there. In a self-service model, you may have developers or someone that bring up a VM and it's there for a few hours or a day or something like that, then it goes away. So if you're charging for those, you have to figure out a way that you're tracking that, especially if you're doing monthly billing, which most people do that do bill. You want to be able to understand and track exactly where that usage is at, and that becomes a little tougher in the cloud model. If any of you have used like a lab manager type product or something, and you've charged for that it's a similar situation. I mean, we introduced that when I was at City about a year ago, and it took us a while to figure out the best way to manage that charge back system within something that was dynamic rather than something that was pretty standard. Okay, so I'll go through a few slides here on some of the VMware solutions to get you to the to this private cloud scenario. So, as we mentioned earlier, vSphere, you guys are already accustomed to that, using it today. How many people out here are doing VDI desktops and using View? Okay, so one of the things to kind of go back to all those points I mentioned earlier, really doesn't matter if it's desktops or if it's servers. All those best practices and things you want to have in your environment are the same regardless. So if you're creating a private cloud from a desktop standpoint, same things all apply. You have to be able to track all those same functions. So having either vSphere or View running, using vCenter to manage that. And then the Vcloud Director, which we announced this week, is your umbrella self-service automation function to go over the top of your clusters to help manage that. And in creating that will get you to the infrastructure as a service, as we refer to it, in a private cloud. Now, you can also, with our VMware partners, you can create the same function on a VMware public cloud. And as was mentioned in the keynote on Tuesday, you have the ability now, or the mobility, to move your VMs and your workloads between a public cloud and a private cloud with the VMware tools. Now, the proprietary clouds, the Amazons, the Googles, as the joke that was used in the keynote, it's like Hotel California. You can check in, but you can't check out. So you can put things out there, but once they're out there, you can't get them back. And the nice thing about the public cloud option with our vCloud APIs and our VMware partners is you can move workloads between the public and the private cloud and have that mobility. So platform as a service and our Spring Source products and that we're now calling vFabric, which is also announced on Tuesday. That's a development framework that will give you a platform as a service function in your private or public clouds. And then down the road, your SaaS offerings using things like Zimbra. If you haven't seen Zimbra, we have, again, some demos of that on the solutions floor. But having those software as a service functions. And this is kind of how most people, similar to what you've done with server consolidation, starting with the low-hanging fruit, starting with development, moving up to lower-end production, maybe higher-end production. Most people who have introduced this into their companies have started by just trying to get an infrastructure as a service cloud set up. A lot of companies, especially in the financial services industry, where I'm focused on, it's done in the private cloud before they ever do anything in the public cloud, and then you can start to stack these things on top of that, and eventually get to a software as a service type function. So I'll show you a few quick things. I don't know, again, if you've had a chance to see the vCloud Director demos and such on the solutions floor. But one of the great things about the vCloud Director tool that we just announced is it now allows you to create what's called virtual data centers, and that's what you see in the middle. And we have them listed here as gold and silver. You can put different resources against those virtual data centers. So maybe you have one tier of storage in one, another tier in another. And then you can set up the service catalogs and tie them directly to different users and groups. So you can have a developer, as an example, who has access. Maybe you have, let's say, 20 different images that are available, but you can say this developer has the ability to use only these 2 images, and they have X amount of RAM, X amount of CPU, X amount of storage they can use. So I don't care if they create 10 VMs or 2 VMs, but they have that one grouping to work with. The other nice thing is if they have only that one function to work with, they tend to be a little better at cleaning up their own shop, if you will. So if they run out of stuff, then they're going to go in and clean up some things that they have neglected to be able to build other VMs. Where in the past, they just keep asking for stuff, and you keep giving it to them, and next thing you know, they have all these things out there that now have to go be cleaned up, and you got to have reports to show you whether they're using these things or not, et cetera, et cetera. So the vCloud Director tool is has a couple of things, one thing included with it that's very nice, and I'll show you more about this on the next slide, but it has a version of our vShield Edge included inside of Vcloud Director. And I'll show you some more about that in just a second. And then I have the chargeback thing over on the side there. Chargeback is not included with Vcloud Director, but I believe VMware has a 6-month promotional thing from when we announced it on Tuesday that you basically get for the normal price of Vcloud Director, you're getting chargeback included with it for 6 months, basically free. I'm assuming after that it'll go back to its normal price, but it's an incentive to get that added in. And as I said earlier, it really helps with the chargeback or potentially showback option to show what your users are doing. So on the vShield products, I'll kind of walk you through these very quickly. Again, we have on the solutions floor, you can see some demos of these tools. But vShield Edge is a new product that we announced, and showing you from the Vcloud Director example where you have a virtual data center. Inside of that virtual data center, you can take a group of VMs and you can wrap basically a firewall around those VMs. So the examples we have here, maybe a DMZ or something that has to be PCI compliant, or in the healthcare world, HIPAA compliant. You can basically put a firewall around these groups of VMs, and this really helps a lot with the multi-tenant issue that I mentioned earlier. So if you have groups that say, oh no, I need my own stuff, I can't be on the same cluster with other folks, being able to show them, I can give you your set of resources and I can wrap this protection around it, seems to be a very good option and seems to resonate well. The vShield app, also known as Zones, which has been out for a while. Sorry, I messed up there a minute ago. So vShield app is the one that wraps around your actual groups of VMs. I apologize for that. The vShield Edge actually wraps around your virtual data center. So you can create a virtual data center for a business, and you can say, I now have this protected for you. All these resources are yours, and there's a firewall wrapped around that. The vShield app side is where you can create groups of VMs within that for, say, DMZ, PCI compliant, et cetera, and you can protect those VMs internally. And then the last product is called vShield Endpoint. And vShield Endpoint, the first function of it is to offload antivirus, the antivirus stuff that goes on your VM, the processing of that. There's plans to add a lot more stuff to that endpoint device that uses up performance on your VMs today, but initially it's to offload the antivirus function. This is just a quick view from a desktop standpoint, some of our desktop products, and just showing basically, the private cloud is not just for servers. The desktops can be managed as a service within a private cloud just as easily. This is a view of some of our management products. So you heard me talk a lot about the need to have better management wrapped around your clusters. These are several of the functions that VMware offers in that space. Integrant is not on here, but that's a big acquisition for us that I think will really help in this overall process. I don't know if many of you have some of these tools today, but again, you can see these down on the floor. You can talk to your sales reps about these tools. Spring Source, so this is just a quick picture of the different Spring Source functions that now make up what we call vFabric. There's also Gemstone, or the Gemfire product, which is a data caching product that we have recently acquired. I don't have it in this slide. I think it's in the next one. But a quick note, that something that I've seen at Citi and a lot of the other financial services companies, they use WebSphere, WebLogic commonly to be their Java app engines. One great thing about the TC Server product, and this also helps a lot in the cloud as far as being much more efficient with your resource usage. 95% of what you want to develop in Java and do can be done by a lightweight Java server like TC Server versus the very heavy engines like WebSphere and WebLogic. So those tend to use a lot of resources, especially on the memory side. And when you're trying to virtualize a lot of these servers, a lot of these development environments, using something like TC Server is much more lightweight. And we've had a lot of success in financial services specifically at getting companies to start using TC Server as a more lightweight engine. So last thing I have here is to show you a use case that we've been working on since I joined VMware in the financial services space. And I just want to show this because it's a kind of a neat view of all of our products basically across the board and a use case that some of our clients are starting to use. So in the banking industry today, there's a lot of development going on in mobile apps. I don't know, some of you may have already downloaded and used some of these, but like Chase, as an example, has a new app on the iPhone where you can just take a picture of a check instead of having to take a physical check to an ATM or to a bank. You can take a picture of it and upload that and deposit your check through that function. And there's a lot of things going on like that right now. And the banks typically have their own internal development staffs that do this, and they're looking for, easy, lightweight ways to build these apps very quickly and get them out to their customers and have them used on, several different devices like smartphones and et cetera, and creating APIs for other third-party users to do as well. So, but the big thing is that customer data is extremely important, and the banks don't want to take that customer data out of their data center. So, in this example, you can see at the very bottom, the customer data stays in the data center, but you can create either a private cloud internally, you can use one of the VMware public clouds, or you can create a hybrid situation between the two. And using a product like Gemfire, which is a data caching tool, you basically can have that data still reside in your data center, but pulled up into that cloud and cached to use for very quick access by the consumer. So if you've got an app on your phone that you want to see exactly, where you're at in terms of your stock portfolio or in terms of, your balances and things like that, providing that real-time data, which is really real-time data, not like what the situation was an hour or two ago, which is typically what you would get today. So using a product like Gemfire and then the vFabric tools like TC Server, Hyperic is an excellent tool for monitoring your Spring and Java environments. And as I mentioned earlier, the insight and management function needed for self-service automation. This is if you're using these Spring tools, Hyperic is an excellent tool to give you a view into what's really happening across your applications. And then RabbitMQ is a common messaging broker. And using all of these with, as you see on the right side, vSphere, vCenter, vCloud Director, and vShield, it pulls together a very nice package of lightweight objects that can be given out to these APIs and to the smartphones. So, in closing, 3 big takeaways here. The first one that I've mentioned several times: make sure you have the right insight inside of your VMware clusters today. Don't just use Virtual Center to monitor and manage something if you're going to wrap the self-provisioning and automation on top of that. You really need something that gives you more insight into what's happening and what's going on inside of your clusters. Number 2, the standards piece. You got to simplify standards. Don't have too many standards. Simplify your processes. As I mentioned earlier, trying to create flow charts of how that stuff actually works and get it streamlined as best you can is going to help tremendously. And the final one is embrace the change. Don't fear automation. A lot of people do that. Try and find ways to ease your IT staff's concern if they have that. Build programs, put things together of what other options that those IT staff will have if they're actually involved in the things that you're automating, because otherwise they're more than likely going to, from a cultural standpoint, going to push back and may not make your transition successful. Well, I did this earlier in the week, and I had these here. I'm not sure if any of these are still going on today. I think most of the sessions are about over. But I would suggest if you guys have any more time today, some of the products that I just skimmed over there, you can go into the Solutions Exchange and see some of those products there. So with that, if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. If you want to try to walk up to the mic, or I'll repeat the question. Go ahead. So the question was, should we upgrade to 4.1 before going to private cloud? The simple question to that is yes, but you don't have to. But there are some functions in 4.1 that definitely will help with some of the things I talked about, like I mentioned the storage and network throttling, some things like that. May or may not resonate for what you need, but you don't have to do that, no. But I would suggest it strongly. Yes? So the question was, what did Citi use as a monitoring product? It was Netuitive. And we had a lot of success with that product. The Integrion product that VMware just bought, we evaluated that product a couple years ago when we chose Netuitive. It wasn't where it's at today. I actually sat for about an hour with one of their guys yesterday and went through a very in-depth demo of Integrion, and I was extremely impressed with what they've done with that product since we evaluated it a couple years ago. But yeah, we use Netuitive to do that. And as I said, those tools, honestly, if there was one thing and only one thing that you went and spent money on and did prior to moving to self-service, would be go get a tool like that, because it gives you so much insight into your clusters that you just do not have with Virtual Center. Virtual Center is a great product, but I heard somebody say yesterday, I think this was kind of jokingly, but it takes like 168 clicks in Virtual Center to get to what one screen shows you on a product like Integrion. So those are extremely important. Any other questions? All right. Thank you guys very much.